Welcome to the fourth episode of Untimely Conversations between myself and Yasuhiko Genku Kimura. In this fourth episode, we explore the topic of complexity, and specifically the origins of complexity in human societies. Why is it that human societies inevitably become so complicated and so complex? And if we can find an answer to that question, can we begin to discern the source of tensions that arise within contemporary societies? We hope you enjoy this discussion.
What is complexity? You know, uh, we are talking about assumptions, and in order to deal with life and solve problems and construct a theory, so to speak, or a body of knowledge to deal with those problems, we need to establish a set of assumptions. Every piece of theory or belief systems, a paradigm, has basic set of assumptions which function as axiomatic assumptions. You can't begin to live if you continue to question your axioms. So you need to, most people don't even ask these questions. Even those who are asking those questions, okay, let me get on with my life. Imagine if we have actually wrong set of assumptions and we assume that to be true. Then when we face life and face problems and we want to solve problems, probably life appears to be more complex than if we had right assumptions for that problems. In consciousness studies, they have hard problems or binding problems, and nobody solved that problem. And maybe there is no solution for that problem because that is not the problem that is inherent to reality, but because it was created by the wrong assumptions we have about consciousness and cognition to begin with. It's like epicycles of the geocentric model. So they had the geocentric model of the universe. The Earth is the center and everything. And in order to justify the observation, they begin to add epicycles after epicycles after epicycles. So the geocentric model of the universe was more complex than the heliocentric model of the universe. In fact, that was the Copernicus's main argument. It is much simpler to explain the phenomena of the universe if we assume that the sun was the center of the universe, not the Earth. It was a simpler, the more cogent way. Yes.
Yeah.
And so today's complexity may be something like adding epicycles to the geocentric model of the universe. And of course, we know either is correct because the Earth is not stationary, neither is sun stationary. So if we look from some distance, it is moving. So it is not like moving around the Earth or sun. It is something else. Right. So depending on the perspective, You can have a geocentric model of the universe. You can have a heliocentric model of the universe, or you can have acentric model of the universe. And then they are all maybe theoretically or mathematically, equivalent. We don't know. At least, based on Einsteinian theory, geocentric model is as mathematically valid as heliocentric model of the universe as a mathematical system. So you just choose, if there is no center to the universe, you can choose any point as a center, and you can explain what's going on. And so, but anyway, so geocentric model is incomplete, and heliocentric model is incomplete. But within that incompleteness, in order to justify the observation, they add many things. That's what they are doing today with the Big Bang theory.
Right.
Every new observation bring into existence new hypothesis, new modification. So it's possible that we have a wrong assumption.
Yeah.
And then we complexify or complicate our theory precisely because of it.
Actually, there's an example that popped up recently in my own life. I have a friend within the technosphere I sometimes have coffee with, and we sort of got into a bit of a heated discussion actually about science, about science and belief, which was actually the topic we were planning on discussing today. And he rejects any sort of notion that there is science to be found in the so-called soft sciences or in social sciences. He rejects it flatly. So he would say that there is no science in psychology. There's no science in sociology or history or even economics. They're just not science. They're not scientific. And one of the, I think, core axioms that he holds is that one of the elements of science is reproducibility. An experiment has to be controlled and reproducible, and I certainly agree with that. But he sort of goes to the next level, and he says that therefore scientific thinking or the scientific method can't really be applied to social phenomena. And I think one of the assumptions that he holds, actually, I was thinking about this, is he sees complexity in the social sphere with many millions of people with different perspectives, and certainly that is the truth. But I think one of the assumptions that he holds is that everybody's thinking and everybody has their own unique perspective. And in fact, I think it could certainly be argued that a lot of people are not thinking, and in fact, the society sometimes is so utterly mechanical that you almost can consider it a controlled system where reproducible experiments can be conducted. So, and I think, hearing what you just said about complexity, I think the two of us were having an argument about complexity, perhaps, because I was trying to sort of apply scientific thinking to certain social phenomena, and he was sort of rejecting it. And so we start looking at the complexity of the world, and we're really seeing two different worlds, I think.
Well, so science means knowledge. And modern science came up with the way of making that knowledge precise and exact. Basically, reducible to mathematics or mathematical language. And today, when we say in a narrow sense, what science means is the discipline, intellectual discipline of dealing with the problem of reality. That is confined, epistemologically confined within the mathematical language. and what is called scientific method. And that which cannot be reduced to mathematics, that which cannot be reduced to scientific method, is not considered to be science, nor authentic knowledge.
Yes.
But that's where they become extreme. So it's like this. Like a scientific method is like a torch, and reality is like darkness. And you just use this torch to really focus on particular areas of reality, and you study it. And they say maybe there's nothing that we can study with this torch. Nothing, no knowledge that we gain outside of this methodology is the real knowledge. So long as they acknowledge that the realm of reality that they are studying is a part of a larger reality, and it is the knowledge of that particular area, but there is a vast expansive reality which science cannot know in the way it is practicing its method, then it is more sane way of approaching it. But what they are saying is, some scientist, scientism, they say those that cannot fit into this is not knowledge. That's where the extremism and the scientific belief starts.
Yeah, and that was the word that I wanted to add is that all of the things outside of the confines of what are treated as science or approachable with so-called science, that stuff really starts to look like belief, because if it can't be studied scientifically, then it's either ignored or it's sort of taken as belief, as a kind of functional belief. And it really starts to look, science increasingly really starts to look like a kind of iceberg where the tip that's sticking out of the water is the science, and then this enormous part under the water is belief.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, the pandemic, watching the way people have related to some of the measures, and some of the governments around the world, what they're doing, and they hold the belief, I think, the assumption that these governments are all working toward the public good, that they have in their hearts a collective good, that they have in their hearts and minds and ending the pandemic, bringing us back to normal. And the more we watch this, the more we start to I think it's reasonable to reassess those assumptions, and that's kind of a scientific approach to social phenomena. But people don't want to do that, and it doesn't really even occur to them very often to do that. And so it begins to look like they're scientists, but they're living very unscientifically.
You see, so there is a body of knowledge, scientific knowledge, that is valid and beneficial for humans. But then people have a perspective, opinion about the scientific knowledge. That is a scientific belief. But that knowledge is the only knowledge there is a belief.
Yes.
And so there's a distinction between scientific knowledge and scientific belief. You know something and you believe that is the only knowledge that is valid, then that becomes a belief. And lots of people have this kind of belief. Not only scientists, but the people who are so-called non-scientists. But you see, reality is very, very rich and multidimensional. And human intelligence is rich and multidimensional. We have not only the ability to think logically, we also have an ability to intuit. And we also have an ability to imagine. And those who believe in science, science believers, place primacy over logical mode of thinking. And imagination, intuition, anything else is below. So in the age of reason, reason is the highest function of human intelligence, and imagination and the others are just kind of a more primitive mode of human intelligence. There's no proof for this. Absolutely, there's no proof for this. And there are people like Goethe, Da Vinci, who was highly, highly intelligent in the sense of logical thinking ability, and had an imagination, intuition, and that constituted their genius. And if you ask Da Vinci or Goethe, for sure, he will have placed the intuition above the logic.
I would have to do the same.
Yes. So we are not denying the value of science, modern science. But there is more to reality, more to human knowledge, and more to human intelligence and human life. And if we just overvalue one aspect of our human intelligence and one aspect of human intellectual activity and one aspect of human knowledge, we miss the whole point of being human. And in some way, that is happening.
Yeah, and I think really that probably gets back to the question that you asked originally. Where does complexity come from?
Mm-hmm.
This is probably generating quite a bit of complexity, or at least complicating things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's much like trying to sort of elaborate a sort of an understanding of the universe. If you assume that a geocentric model, then you have to sort of contort evidence to sort of make it work. And in the social sphere, maybe it's much the same. If we privilege a certain kind of scientific knowledge and deny things like intuition, then we really have to sort of squeeze the world through that lens and to try to make it fit. And we start, I think we start getting things to be very complicated.
Yes. And there are a few other elements for this, So people who go into science, they have gift in logical thinking, and when you are good at something, you enjoy doing it. And then you have to face different aspects of reality where you don't have that much talent, or at least you haven't developed it. You feel powerless as opposed to powerful. And so people want to stay in an area and experience where they feel powerful, and they don't feel comfortable dealing with an aspect of life and reality where they don't have the competence or power. So you said, and many intellectuals say, I'm very good at science, not very good at making money. And so then you don't want to really look into it. So this is something to do with human psychology, where people focus on the areas where they're good at. They don't pay attention, too much of attention to the areas they are not good at, especially precisely because of that reason, the person continue to remain to be incompetent at an area that they don't want to focus. Another thing is, so that is also, it's more like an insecurity. And another thing is uncertainty, the intellectual uncertainty. So you want to continue to create more and more certainty in areas where you have competency. And then when you face an area where you don't have much competency, and then you have the uncertainty, intellectual uncertainty, you don't want to deal with it. You want to stay in the certainty. So psychologically security, intellectually certainty, and the people avoid insecurity and uncertainty. And they tend to go into the areas where they can continue to expand their certainty, and where they have competency to do that. And so you can't apply mathematical physics to human relationships. If you fall in love with a woman, well, how are you going to figure this out? And but is such an important aspect of our life. And of course, making a living and so on and so forth. That goes along with human life, where mathematics does not really apply. Yes?
Absolutely.
And also there are areas of reality that require different method of knowledge from the modern scientific methodology. And you see, like a poet is expressing knowledge. It is what they see something. They have a vision in the imagination, and they are conveying that vision to you. It is a form of knowledge. They receive something, and they're sharing it with you. It is a different kind of knowledge from the mathematical physics. You can't confuse them both. And which is in a higher form of knowledge. You cannot compare them.
Yeah, it really the world is really complex, I suppose, then, because there's so many different kinds of intelligences, and they really are intelligences, and so few people have develop more than a handful of them, one or two, and so there is a lot of complexity, I suppose, originating in that fact.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are very, very competent within scientific fields,
Mm-hmm.
studying chemistry or physics.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have a knack for understanding politics.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are very intuitive, and so they all sort of perceive something. They all get a piece, and there's in a way there's no integrative force that are sort of bringing all of those streams of knowledge together and understanding together. And so we have all these partial views sort of advocating for what it is that they value, what it is that they want. And it seems to me that's a place where a lot of complexity arises, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess is that just something we're stuck with? I mean, this is one of the reasons I really like the concept of a developmental model, and one of the reasons I kind of always sort of default back to discussions on things like that, because say what you want about integral, the integral communities online, but it does seem to me that there is maybe a kind of integrative wave, and that really it's sort of as a consequence of the fact that the world is so atomistic in this way. It almost has to happen.
You see, integration is kind of natural for thinking person. To think is to integrate.
Mm.
You do ongoingly do the differentiation and integration. So integrative thinking didn't start in the 20th century.
I
I
agree.
mean, read Plato, Aristotle, highly, highly integrative. I mean, all the Hindu philosophies, Buddhist philosophies, highly, highly integrative. So, they didn't read the kind of books that we read today, but they have read a lot. They discuss amongst themselves, and they put it together, something. It is an integration. So some of the Buddhist scriptures are amazing piece of cosmology.
Hmm.
And same with Hindu cosmology. So integration is a natural function of thinking intelligence. And the integration and differentiation all come together. But as a general trend, since the time of Descartes, I think the trend has been analyzing, which means more of a focusing on differentiating.
Yes.
But at the same time, Descartes himself put together some philosophy. Galileo himself put together some theory of cosmos. So there's always integration, but the focus was more like analyzing. So in a sense, the trend is shifting, paying more attention to integration. That we can say. But any thinker worthy of its name is integrative thinker. And in order for you to do original differentiation, you need to be able to do original integration. It goes
Yeah,
together.
that's true.
Differentiation is a form of integration, and integration is a form of differentiation. So it is a two major function of thinking: making distinctions and then making connections.
So yeah, that's very true actually.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you think that so there's a preponderance of analysis as you say? I think that's probably the truth. Do you think there's enough making connections happening or integration in our society? Like is that a weakness, would you say?
I think there is a kind of a, you can say, conspiracy of keeping people specialized,
Mm.
preventing people from integrating what Buckminster Fuller calls becoming a comprehensivist. Somebody, not somebody, some people who can integrate diverse field of knowledge into a unified whole. There have been people like that, obviously. But as a general trend, there is a conspiracy to make people, make and keep people being a specialist. And so even those who are integrative, the system captures them and they make specialists in integration. Complexity theory, system theory, it's again, and then that's the issue is, integral movement. Now they have a particular mode of integration, and then now you become an expert in a Ken Wilber's model. And again, it is a specializing.
Mm.
You see, so thinking is a process, and function of thinking has an ongoing differentiation and ongoing integration. So it is a process. It doesn't stop any place. And society tend to want to stop this and formalize it and create a specialist in a particular form. And then you have the peer review system. So the more stupid member of the peer review board can say no to the genius's writing.
Yeah.
Some original thinker shows up and really come up with amazing idea, and this stupid review board member has no idea what this person is saying and say no, and then the paper isn't published.
I think it happens probably more often than people realize, actually.
Yeah, actually, probably truly original thinkers are no longer welcomed into mainstream academia.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. It's a very unfortunate development, actually. Let me ask you a question. You asked where does complexity come from? I have sort of a question that's parallel to that. Where does second simplicity come from? Is that really what we're discussing? That sort of making connections?
Very good, very good. Yeah, that's a good question. So the kind of complexity we are talking about, I offered you one perspective, which I just came up as we were talking, is that when you have a wrong set of assumptions, and that set become axiomatic, in order to make theory correspond to observation, you make that theory more and more complex, just like epicycles of the geocentric model. So then you go into the next level of simplicity, simply because you can no longer handle this, is to create new set of axiomatic assumptions. Then if you have a right set of assumptions, same phenomenon can be explained much more simply. Copernicus' theory was more simple than geocentric model with ever increasing number of epicycles. So we need to really examine our own assumptions. For example, scientist assumes that this subcorporeal dimension of subatomic particles that are not really particles is the fundamental basis of reality, physical reality. And they don't accept any reality that is not physical to begin with. But within that, so subatomic particles come together to become atoms. Atoms become that is the basic assumption. Now, is that really the case? So I am not a quantum physicist, so I don't claim to know the technicality of it, but I have read many books about it. And so I'm offering you, you're a scientist, maybe you can offer me your perspective. So I think quantum physics was kind of established. So Max Planck's discovery, in 1900, and I think Heisenberg came up with this metrics mathematics to describe the quantum phenomenon, and then Schrodinger's equations. That's like 1925, 1920, around that time.
Yeah.
Yes. So in 25 years, quantum physics was established, and based on what I have read, it is the most precise and exact science ever developed by humans in the whole history of human knowledge. So as far as the predictions and descriptions concerned, it is extremely accurate. However, great physicist Richard Feynman says, if you think you understand quantum physics, you don't really understand it. Yes.
What did he mean by that?
Because of the paradox. Yes, is the paradoxical based on the experimentation. It is neither particle nor wave, or it is either particle or wave, or it is both. It's like our normal way of understanding reality does not apply to it, and I think they cannot really explain why. They can explain how, and to understand, you need to know why that is the case. I'm simply simplifying, but I think that is it. Understanding requires why. Knowledge you can have a knowledge of how, but to understand, you need to know, you need to have the understanding why that's the case. Not only that, in the case of quantum physics, it doesn't even have what. If you ask, what is quantum particle? They have no answer. The quantum energy and the quantum entities are only described operationally. And their operations are described and predicted with amazing accuracy. But what is quantum physics, a quantum entity?
Yeah.
And why they behave the way they behave, they can't explain. Unless you know what, and you know why, you don't understand. Now, I think Heisenberg, I have two books on, just one second. Philosophy of Science, written by a great physicist. One is this Physics and Philosophy by Heisenberg. The other one is a Philosophy of Physical Science by Arthur Eddington. I think this was developed from his lecture. And they're brilliant books. I mean, I highly, anybody who is interested in philosophy of science, this is the person who is the highest level scientist writing philosophically. It's a very good book. Anyway, Heisenberg says that the quantum entities are, I'm paraphrasing, but this is what he means. I understand. I think they don't really exist. They are somewhere between possibility and reality.
Right.
And so it is not real. But obviously, it's not a pure possibility like mathematical possibilities. But they're somewhere between. It is like a subsistence, not an existence.
Yeah.
And then you can measure its behavior, and you can calculate the probability of their behavior is almost, accurately. But when you measure and observe, it is no longer in the subcorporeal level. It is in the corporeal level, because measurement instrument and observer is in a corporeal dimension. Observer cannot observe the quantum entity, and the measuring instrument cannot go into that level on the measure. When it is measured, it's actually, so you see, which means, ontologically speaking, the corporeal reality is more primary than subcorporeal level. So this is a whole. Corporeal reality is a whole. And the subcorporeal is a part. It's almost like this is a whole body. Originally, it was one cell and divided it. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
So this corporeal reality is like one body, and atoms are like molecules. No, sorry, cells. And subatomic particles are like molecules. But suppose you can have all the molecules that your body has and put them together. You're not going to be, it is not going to be Tom Warner. It is whole was first, and parts came into existence with along with a whole. One cell, one corporeal reality, and subcorporeal reality is part of it, but it is not the whole of it. So even if you put all the subatomic particles that you know to constitute a particular entity, if you put them together, it is not going to become that particular entity. There's something is missing. And that's what Buckminster Fuller was pointing out in his book Synergy. Behaviors of the whole system cannot be predicted by the knowledge of the behaviors of its subsystems observed apart from the whole.
Yeah.
Okay, now that's, but I think, and he has a corollary. If you know the behavior of the whole and the behavior of the sum of its parts, subsystems, then you can predict the behavior of the other parts that whose behaviors you don't know yet. Now, to me, the corollary is more primary ontologically.
I agree.
So you see, so the whole comes first. That is the Chinese Taoist way of thinking, and actually Eastern way of thinking. The whole is more primary than part.
And that's the intuitive way of thinking.
Yeah, it is intuitive way of thinking. But also now we can logically see that, subcorporeal, subatomic entities, if they are entities, just entities with a quotation mark, are not the building block of the corporeal entities. Something is not there, which put them together.
Yes.
And then nobody has ever figured out the operations of this putting together. And that comes into also the problem with the theory of evolution. Well, it is more like a blind faith. Well, something simple organism become more and more complex, and eventually amoeba become human. Given enough time. Now, what is that enough time? And assuming that the calculation is correct, the time it took is pretty short. And then, there's a book, what is his name? His name, author. Is in my library. Michael B. He, I think. The Darwin's Black Box. And he is an evolutionary biologist. And he was ostracized from the evolutionary biology community after writing this book.
Mm.
And he has this notion of irreducible complexity. So any living creatures have something. And some of those organisms have irreducible complexity means that if any element that constitutes that entity, if one element is missing, it no longer exists. Okay? Every component is necessary for this to exist. That's called irreducible complexity.
Right.
He has shown that irreducible complexity does not show up from the bottom-up evolution.
Like an eye, for example.
Yeah. Eye is so complex.
Yeah.
Funny, eye in the human ego, eye is also very complex.
That's true.
this guy is so complex. Anyway, and there's a gap. And then, it is like, no, if you have given enough time, but it is not the time that makes this happen. That he has actually shown. And some mathematician has proven that mathematically. He calls it complex specified information. This complex specified information on particular DNA cannot be assembled from the simpler set of DNAs. Or,
yeah. I mean, I one of the things that sort of irks me a little bit about this debate is that about the whole evolutionary thing, and I would consider it a debate still rather than settled science, quote unquote.
Oh yeah, no, yes.
The idea of evolution isn't actually really at odds with the idea of creation. Something can be created and it can evolve, and it can in fact be created as a creation of evolution. And so one of the things that sort of often irks me actually about scientists that get really dogmatic about evolution is that they I guess what it is maybe it is a sort of a failure to perceive the whole, and maybe that's what scientism is. It's the careful systematic study of parts with no appreciation for how the parts add or contribute to a larger whole. And maybe that's also where second simplicity comes in, is the intuitive perception of a whole in which the parts operate. And the complexity before second simplicity is like not fully appreciating that whole, that context, and trying to study all of these parts in a sort of atomized way, and everything's very complex.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe being able to really sort of start to notice broader contexts or holistically see how something operates as parts of a larger whole is to really develop a broader understanding of it. And what I think a lot of evolutionary biologists get very caught up in a lot of the finer details. And when
you
go ahead.
Oh, okay. The concept of evolution is not new.
Yeah.
what is new in Darwinian evolution is that mechanism to explain the biological evolution. Now, for example, Bible, Genesis describes the creation. Exodus describes evolution.
That's interesting.
Genesis and epigenesis. And Gurdjieff, Shri Aurobindo both use this involution as a creation and evolution. So ancient esoteric cosmology had this notion of involution, evolution as a two-way motion. So wherever there's evolution, there's an involution. Which is more causative? Involution comes first. If we have to, they coexist. But if we have to give a sequence, involution first and evolution next. It's like a genesis and epigenesis. So it's like So which means there is a enfoldment and unfoldment, coding and decoding, encoding and decoding. From this perspective, causation doesn't exist in this world of effect. What we see is created, and evolutionary process taking place on the other side. It is not,
I see what you mean. It reminds me actually of you posted something on Facebook a few years ago that I still remember. You gave a couple of options. What is science? I think was the gist. Mm-hmm. And the option that I gravitated toward most was we're able to understand the world in such a way that we can make predictions, but we don't necessarily get to the underlying nature of existence. Mm-hmm. So it allows us to make predictions, mm-hmm. but what's happening underneath that, or does it really allow us to get a really deep view of the inner mechanics of the universe? Maybe not. Mm-hmm. And so perhaps that's really what you're talking about here with involution and evolution.
Yes. And you see, there are different modes of knowing. There are different modes of understanding. And knowledge is not limited to physical science, and knowledge is not limited. The method of knowledge is not limited to scientific method, and it is great to use scientific method where it is appropriate.
Yes.
And our human consciousness or intelligence has different dimensions, and the scientific knowledge of a physical dimension of reality and poetic knowledge of something supracorporeal can coexist. You don't need to be either a scientist or a poet. Yeah. You can be both. But if you want to create the largest possible integration, which is a better framework, definitely poetic vision, because you'll get the whole picture.
Yes, yeah, I agree. I agree. I think the word I often use is intuition for this. But I mean, there are things.
Intuition, yes, it is intuition.
Yeah, there are things that you don't see them scientifically. You just see them, and you can unpack them and try to describe them such that you can communicate them to somebody else scientifically. But I think it remains the case that a lot of things are perceived. They're just perceived as they are. They aren't perceived, scientifically, so to speak. So there's another process there to try to elaborate something scientifically or explain it. But I mean, probably a lot of the great scientific discoveries were intuitive on some level. Yes. And they were just fleshed out mechanically and materialistically, right?
Yeah. Albert Einstein himself said famously, yes,
Yeah.
imagination is more important than knowledge, and that imagination is like a evolution, and intuition is like a involution. And you receive knowledge not based on all that knowledge you have accumulated. You don't disregard them. But when you have a real great intuition, it's really almost like the unknown inspiring, not inspiring, inspiring too, but whispering its secret to you. And when your mind is infused with this kind of intuition, then you have a different kind of imagination through which you can create new knowledge.
Yes.
That is not inconsistent with the knowledge that we have. But so scientific knowledge basically not consistent. The greater expansion. But if we expand the mode of logic beyond Aristotelian logic and make it possible for us to think in a different modality of logic, translogical and trans-rational mode of thinking, the way we integrate knowledge may not be in the form of like a treatise. It's like, and one piece of theory. It is integrated. There's an inner coherence, the harmony, but there's something more. Lucretius on the nature of things, which was the scientific treatise based on Epicurean and Democritus theory of atomism. That whole treatise was written in poetry. And one of the reasons why it had such appeal is because it was written so beautifully. Imagine scientific treatise written entirely in poetic verses and being one of the most beautiful poems ever composed by humans, and it contains the entire cosmology, Epicurean cosmology. So what happened? So it influenced the poets, and it influenced philosophers, and that moved the humans in the direction of Renaissance and modern scientific revolution. People actually say that discovery of Lucretius on the nature of things was the key event that led to scientific revolution, because anybody who was somebody in the intellectual community read it. And Epicurus was extremely scientific philosopher. Yeah. Benjamin Franklin said that Epicurus was more Aristotle than Aristotle himself. And Thomas Jefferson called himself Epicurean. Of course, Epicurus has been ostracized, marginalized. Most of his writings all disappeared. But you see, because of this on the nature of things, we know his philosophy and cosmology. Epicurus said that it is not the God that creates humans; it is humans that create God.
Yeah, we humans create a lot of
Yes. In BC 300. That's quite a radical statement, huh?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, very. It's not, well, in certain parts of the world, that's a pretty radical statement today.
Yeah, and it is there's a deep, ethical, moral undertone, And in today's world, there's spiritual tone, obviously. So there's a sense of spirituality is always present. But the philosophy is pretty radical, even for Greeks.
Yeah, he sounds like he was really remarkable.
Yeah. Nietzsche doesn't really have a high opinion of him, though.
That's interesting.
But I don't know how much he read, Well, actually, Nietzsche only criticized people whom he respected.
That's not
So
surprising.
it's possible that he had a respect for Epicurus.
Yeah, I mean, something has to be sufficiently, sophisticated in its description of reality to be worthy of criticism. Actually, if it's
Yeah,
if it's just nonsense, then there's no point in even.
it's like a Facebook. You say something and people disagree with it. Is it worthwhile my time to responding to this or not?
Yeah.
And some people. So if you or I respond to somebody, which means there's an element of respect.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So we can say, I guess, to sort of pull it together, the question you originally asked, where does complexity come from? I think what I gained from this conversation is really complexity comes from sort of an inability to perceive a whole and to really focus on parts, and really almost to focus on parts in a reductionistic way, such as scientism, for example. And from that we get complexity, and maybe the second simplicity originates when we start to see a bigger, more holistic picture in which we can look at some of the parts.
Yes. In addition to what you said, maybe there are two things. Reality is actually very complex.
No doubt. Yeah.
Yes. And to understand reality, a simple-minded person cannot understand. Simpleton is not able to understand reality. So there is a genuine complexity that exists in the form of reality. Then complexity that we create usually come from the wrong set of assumptions taken to be axioms and wrong way of approaching life and reality as such. And what you described is exactly one of those. Before they get into focus on parts, there's an assumption.
Yeah.
Parts make up the whole. That is a total assumption. Nobody proved that, and actually, it is wrong. It is wrong.
Right.
It is. I'm clear about that. Whole comes first, and so when we construct something, yes, you can put them together in that sense. But reality, universe, life, whole comes first. From this perspective, Darwinian theory fails. So they need to come up with something entirely different from Darwinian theory to explain life, where we came from. If they don't want to accept the fact that, accept the biblical story, then you have to come up with something.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Actually, I'm a little bit surprised sometimes by some of these, the Darwinian people, so-called, who are surprised that this virus is mutating. The COVID is mutating so rapidly, having administered a so-called leaky vaccine. And it makes me wonder if they understand the theory at all. But
well, then also because of this institutionalization of science, original thinking is not allowed. And for many scientists, science is their job.
Yeah.
And so long as they do their job, they get to feed themselves, their families. And the original theory that can actually destroys their paradigm, endangers their job.
Yes.
One thing I can say, one phenomenon. So cancer was discovered long time ago. Yes. And I think it was Nixon, one of those, in 1916, 17, there was a war on cancer was declared. And enormous amount of money went into cancer research to find a cure. So there is, people who go into cancer research, actually research are very smart people, and cancer research, very smart people. So thousands and thousands and thousands upon highly intelligent scientific mind went into researching and trying to find a cure for cancer well over 50, 60 years. And they have not found it. Why?
Well, the answer I suppose I would give right off the hop is it's very, very difficult to cure.
And to me, there's can be layman's perspective, maybe sometimes more accurate than professionals. And as I said, one is probably the whole paradigm upon which cancer research is based is actually inappropriate. It just doesn't work. Wrong set of assumptions, number one. And number two, unfortunately, there is a cancer industry built around cancer that survives and thrives so long as cancer remains unresolved.
That's true.
So the two things combined, and probably both of this, maybe there's a underlying paradigm and underlying assumptions axiomatically accepted that create, on the one hand, wrong paradigm for dealing with cancer, and on the other hand, creating this cancer industry surviving and thriving on people having cancer and not being cured. And if we can identify this paradigm, meta paradigm, and then those two paradigms, we may be able to see new light. However, anybody who find it will be eliminated.
Yeah, it's
he or she will not be accepted in the scientific community, and he or she will not be able to practice medicine in the cancer industry.
Yeah, well,
this is a tragedy.
You can see actually how many doctors lost their licenses or got in serious trouble just for not towing the official party line on COVID, or for trying to prescribe ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine. They weren't allowed to do it. In Canada, I don't know what it's like in the United States. It's probably varies state to state. But I mean, if this is the general reality within medicine, then yeah, I mean, it's this is a significant barrier to advancement, really. I think cancer is quite tricky because there's so many different kinds and there's so many different reasons for it. It's sort of like a breakdown of the machinery of the cell in one or more ways. And so before you even set out to cure it, quote unquote, it may be that what you administer is for a different kind of cancer, a different So they have drugs, for example, that it's not a very holistic approach, I think. It's a very atomistic approach. There's just a million different specific kinds of, and that's our current paradigm. That's the current understanding of it.
And in the case of humans, everything that happens is psychosomatic.
Mm.
And if you disregard the psychological element, I'm not saying everything is psychogenetic, but everything is psychosomatic. Let's say if you eat something bad, you have a stomach ache. Is that psychosomatic? Yeah, because you have an emotional reaction to it, and maybe you're in a certain state of psychology to have overeaten something.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing.
So when we begin to this, you cannot really separate psychology and the body. So cancer or anything, we need to look at humans, whole system. Well, just because you have a breast cancer, you don't just look at the breast. Or if you have a pancreas cancer, you need to look at the whole system. And in the case, even man has a breast cancer, yes?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So each person has the whole body, and maybe he or she was prone to having cancer, and maybe that particular part of the body was a kind of weak point for that person, and he or she had a cancer there. So we need to look at the body, the whole system, and whole system also include lifestyle, and the environment, and so on and so forth. So that's requires a multidisciplinary approach, which is good.
Yeah.
Yes, but an aspect of what I said exists in every segment of the society. For example, having read sufficient number of books that I know that theory of evolution, as we taught in school, Darwinian model or neo-Darwinian, there's too many counter evidence, but they still teach because there are professors, evolutionary biologists, their whole career were built upon this theory. Yes,
Yeah.
and you're an expert in this. All of a sudden, it is a wrong theory. Well, what are they going to do? You see, so I can understand in a human sense. Same is through science. I'm reading that Einsteinian relativity just doesn't stand.
Yeah, I've heard people say that actually.
Many of the evidence, and definitely this Big Bang theory, there's something totally wrong about that.
Yeah.
Big Bang theory, long time ago, I just intuitively said, Big Bang theory sounds like a geocentric model of the universe.
Yeah.
Because it is adding so many different epicycles and stuff like that. That's a long time ago. Now I know I was right.
Yeah, it always seemed wildly implausible to me, actually. But the truth is often stranger than fiction.
I had one joking joke on the Facebook. The Big Bang is a sound that takes place when scientists bang their head on the wall when they cannot come up with the better theory or something. It was my joke, and
yeah,
sounds like it.
Yeah, and society ends up banging its head. I think this society's banged its head a few times, actually. But anyway,
when you cannot find, if you sincerely work on something, some problem solution, sincerely work on it, and if you don't come up with a solution, the first thing you must do is to examine the assumptions.
Yeah.
On the basic level, when you want to go somewhere, you need to assume physically the right direction. And this applies beyond the physical assumption, metaphysically, theoretically, thought. You see, when you think, you are in quest of an object, which we call truth. And if your thought, but the direction that your thought has is based on the assumptions you have. And if you also based on the world in which you live. So if you cannot find it, you need to examine this mental world in which you operate and assumptions upon which you are thinking. And this mental world includes language.
Yes, definitely.
And mathematicians who are thinking in a limited sense of mathematics only, maybe they can never find the truth.
Yeah, there's a lot of avenues, I think, that have to sort of cooperate, I think, maybe
Yes.
on that path. And to focus on one or two reductionistically is probably not going to get you there.
And today we have that, in a way, the interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, collaborative opportunity arising. There are 8,000 different academic disciplines. You know that, yes? 8,000.
Yeah, I knew there was a lot. That's more than I would have guessed,
8,000.
actually. Yeah.
There are only 6,000 languages.
Wow.
There are 8,000 disciplines. And I'm sure some of the disciplines, we may laugh at the name of it, I'm sure. But anyway, so nobody knows. Nobody is an expert on more than 2 or 3 disciplines, people say.
Yeah, it's hard to be an expert on one, actually.
Even let's say Da Vinci is reborn. Probably he won't be able to know everything.
Yeah.
So, interdisciplinary and the transdisciplinary approach is excellent. It is a new form of integration that is now necessary and actually point toward a new possibility of human intellectual engagement.
I agree. I think this is one of the reasons that I had that argument with my friend in the first place, because I think the scientists really have to sort of step out of that very narrow materialistic emphasis on everything being controllable and reproducible and stuff. That is true, but I mean, you have like once you learn science, there should be no block to sort of using that same mentality to examine life and to examine other parts of existence or other forms of knowledge. And rather than doing that, they sort of dismiss those things very often. So,
one of the ways that can happen, the whole new kind of society and new kind of living happens, is if nobody needs to ever make a living, so that everybody can pursue his or her own interest.
Mm.
And do you know we have enough wealth for us to make that happen already?
Probably, yeah.
For example, one human being, the maximum wealth that one person can achieve, actually minimum wealth one can achieve is beyond which one cannot make any change in lifestyle, is $800 million. Okay, so if you have $800 million and somebody has $8 billion or somebody else has $80 billion, lifestyle you live is the same as the people who have 8 billion, 80 billion, and people looking from outside, you three look as wealthy as each other.
Right.
Now, and you don't need $800 billion. But anyway, if that's the case, There's so much wealth available already. Imagine all those wealthy people, instead of just holding the money to themselves, to their family, they can use their money to create abundant world. We have that wealth already, know-how, technological know-how, a sufficient amount of resources to make that happen. And everyone, there is no such thing as overpopulation. If every person is given the freedom to pursue his or her own interest, and everybody become productive, there will be no overpopulation. And that's what Buckminster Fuller said in 1970s. Yeah. But then, nobody is interested in doing that at this moment. But I'm telling you, if you don't need to make a living, would you be working for the company, although you're interested in what you're doing? Maybe you do something else.
I might still do it actually. I do enjoy doing it, but I think there would be considerably less pressure.
Yeah.
You might,
okay. So in your case, you're one of the lucky fews.
Probably wouldn't do it as much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. If I had money, I would probably be more of a jack of all trades actually.
Yeah. Most people would be like that actually.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, we spoke enough.
Okay. Great. Great chat, Yasuhiko. Always nice to chat with you.
Okay. Very good.
Thanks, Yasuhiko.
Thank you very much.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.